Hey, how's it going? It's me, Matt, the Avoided Soul, and I got another little idea that came to me about religion. I was having a discussion with someone earlier today. I just did the whole 8-mile run thing and got washed up, so I'm a little bit tired right now, but it stuck with me throughout my bathing. I think I got a good way to articulate it. I was having a discussion about heaven. And people were talking to me, and free will. I was discussing with one of my fellows about how heaven is supposedly like this great, wonderful place, and everything is peaceful, and everyone loves. And I was asking, what makes heaven heaven? What are you describing in this thing? You could just use the word heaven, and it could have no meaning. What meaning are you assigning to it? This togetherness with God, completeness with that. And we were talking about the idea of free will. I mean, if you could somehow magic free will into existence, if you could prove that there's something outside of our physical universe, inside of us, that makes our decisions for us, then you would have a case. Saying that our decisions are subjective and are a cause of, the conditions of the start for. That's just causality. That's the same thing as just holding something up and boom, it drops. That's causality, cause and effect. It's a result of every action having an equal and opposite. So, what's so special about free will? Well, there are people involved, and people have emotions, and they'd like to look at it and think, it comes solely from me and nothing from, not from anything else, but really you're just drawing off your experiences and your genetics. Just what's happened to you, and the pattern that is you that is formed together. It's so obvious if you look at people that they're a sum of the parts. They're just a sum. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and I think some incredibly awesome things come from that. And I'm a big fan of human living and our decisions, and I think that it has value. I would say it has inherent value based on our ability to perceive it and stuff like that, but that's all a priori arguments. What we're talking about here is free will. So I don't even think there hasn't been a good case for free will made. In this Christian assumption, this is a decisively Christian argument, is that there's free will. Okay, so give them that. Let's say there is free will. That's what makes life worth living. That's their answer to a question of the problem with pain, the problem with suffering. Everyone suffers. I don't think anybody's going to say, I don't suffer. I've never suffered. So people suffer in an idea where there's an all-powerful and all-loving God, and all-loving would seem to indicate that they would love everyone, and they would want to prevent pain. They would want a perfect world for everyone. And an all-powerful God would mean that they would have the power to do it, and there would be no barriers between their will and what happens. You put these together, and you don't get pain. There's in our universe, omnibenevolent and omnipotent don't go together. It's impossible. But let's just give it to him. Let's say, okay, a prerequisite for this, God wanted to be interesting. He didn't want automatons, right? God didn't want automatons who just ultimately believe in them. He wanted them, to have choice and pain. Pain brought God happiness. Pain made him happy, and he's God. So we can just skip the whole complete illogic of a benevolent and potent God together. You throw those out the window, pretend like that argument doesn't go, and just take them at face value of it can coexist, and it has to do with choice. Well, the universe influences our choice. What happens to us determines what we do. What we're made of, and what happens to us on the outside determines our actions. What other factor could there be? The only thing you could posit is a spirit or a soul. And arguably that would be under the same sort of constraints. And if it's not, you've just made a posit for magic. You've just said, whoa, there's this magic invisible being with no explanation. You've got no proof that it exists. And you're just, magicking it out of thin air and saying, okay, there is this thing here that's an X factor. Even if you had this sort of random factor, fine. Then it's still a factor. You can look at it as a cause and then see the actions. There's still nothing magical about it. There's nothing free about that. It's deterministic to say cause and effect. Oh, there was an effect. There automatically was a cause. Why would you have to say that there has to be, like, what is there, like some sort of random variance there, and that's what gives the idea of free will? Like, you really don't know what you're talking about if you're saying we have free will. I mean, subjectively we make our decisions, but our decisions are then made. I don't see how there's any freedom there. Like, but let's just walk away from that argument, because that's ridiculous. People will argue with you about that all day. So if you just let them have that step, demolish them here. When someone's talking about heaven, I had an epiphany. This is completely on my own. I'd never read this anywhere. I've never heard this used before. It might have already been brought up. But if people are saying that God didn't create the universe full of people who are all good and who he can love completely, and who, he doesn't have to separate from himself, where some are good and some are bad. So he created the world knowing that they were going to be the bad ones, but that's just, an understandable sacrifice, so he could get the good ones. So you have to think, the real question to ask is, why didn't God create a universe where there was no suffering, where everything was awesome, completely wicked, bad, cool all the time? The answer to this, people say, is free will. There had to be suffering, to make it interesting or whatever. Okay, but then isn't the end result in heaven the exact same fucking thing? Like, people would ask, well, how much, if you were a God and you created something, how much would you love? What would be the value of robot love? Well, I mean, in heaven, isn't that what you have? Like, all the decisions are made, everything, boom, you're at the end, heaven is full of beings, and all they are is good, and all they do is worship and kneel at your feet, and you've just got an entire place full of robots, again. And then you have a bunch of people suffering off to the side as the end result. Because, in their whole, our idea of the universe, they think the world is coming to an end, that Jesus is coming, sword from his mouth, blah, 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 and the beast is going to cast into the lake, so on and so forth, weird, blood, sacrifice God predictions. So, if you take that at face value, God's end point, the ultimate reason for all of this, is exactly what the Christian is telling you that God was trying to avoid. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Checkmate. Peace out. Fuck off.